So some quick thoughts on last night's tasting. We looked at Grand Purge Mishak 2002. Both were in cork. We looked at two bottles. One had just come up from Sydney, and the other one has been here since it was released from the winery. Now, there's a lot of debate about the quality of secondary market wines generally around the world. There's no question there's a risk. You take your chances because of this all-encompassing issue of provenance. The general consensus from most of the pros around the world is that a wine that's been shipped into Asia is compromised because of the temperature, the heat, the humidity, the shipping issues, etc., etc., and still prevailing lack of consideration for properly stored wines. My personal experience from buying secondary market wines in Australia in the last 10 or 15 years is that I would say on a rough guesstimate 60 to 70% of the wines were fine. I'd say you've got about a 30% risk profile from most of the major auction houses that I've experienced wine from. You've got to be careful about these kind of things, but when you're buying at auction, you don't really get a chance to look at anything until you view it. So on these two wines, the Mishak 2 is a highly rated wine. In my opinion, as a vintage for Mishak 02, the wines, the versions that I've had here in Singapore are at the top of their maturation window, and probably have another 2 or 3 years to go, and then will start to fade. That's probably after having seen 5 or 6 of them in the last 2 years. Comparing that to the bottle that was bought at auction and brought up by a friend of mine, it was really interesting because we found the quality of the Singapore located Mishak 02 to be far better than the quality of the Sydney located 02. And the only reason that we could come up with for this was a consideration that the majority of the secondary market Australian wines that we promote here in Singapore through Wine Exchange Asia have been bought from one specific storage location as a result of the wine investment phase that was running through Singapore over the last decade or so. These wines have been sourced predominantly directly from the vineyard and have been shipped to Singapore and stayed for between 5 and 10 years sitting in one professional storage location. And I think that's the upshot and the reason why, on a balance, there might be a very strong argument for the fact that secondary market Australian wines bought here in Singapore are in actual fact less of a risk than the general quality of wines that we've happened to have seen across the board. This is an opinion, it might not be the reality of it, but that's been our experience in the last year or two. Just a thought. Cheers.